radius. Puts up a three. And goal!
It's Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network as the transfer portal madness is upon us. I'm your host, Russ Heltman of Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. He is my co-host, Neil Meyer from Rivals Cincinnati site, thefrontofficenews.com. Check us out both there. All of the good work going on across a busy past 24 hours with now 4 Bearcats in the transfer portal as we record this opening part of the show slate in the beginning portion of this week, and a couple of additions for the Bearcats. 6 total nuggets to get to on the transfer portal docket. Bearcats did not even make a semifinal in another second-rate postseason tournament. They have yet to make the semifinals of a second-rate postseason tournament or a first-rate postseason tournament under Wes Miller in the new era, and he is hoping new GM Corey Evans can help him find the right roster mixture to make that statement I just said a falsity moving forward. They're trying to get to some postseason success for the first time in the Wes Miller era. We'll discuss that. We're not going to discuss the college basketball crown and the loss to UCF. There's no real point to that. Is old news at this point. Get to the additions. Sincere Harris and Kerr Kriisa come into the UC Bearcats backcourt, and we'll get to the exits in terms of Tyler Betsy, Dan Skillings, Rayvon Griffith, and Josh Reed, all 4 entering the portal to start this week. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. Get to Bearcat Blitz right now on the Believe Network after these messages. Russ Heltman of Cincinnati Bearcats on SI here with my co-host Neil Meyer of the frontofficenews.com, Cincinnati's rivals Cincinnati coverage site. Neil, let's get to the additions after the exits. That sounds like the proper way to do the deed here, as you smartly told us to wait a day to do this show, and we got a lot more to talk about because of it. Tyler Betsy, Neil, in the transfer portal. That is the freshest news we have entering this show. Happened just minutes before we started recording.
Yeah, that's a huge thing to talk about, Russ, because like we mentioned, we were talking about filming this show on Monday, right? And then we came up with the decision to say, hey, let's wait this thing, obviously, because we had a feeling and we heard some rumblings that there was going to be the news was going to start coming for Cincinnati. And here we are. We're sitting on Tuesday. It's about 11 o'clock as we film this, and it's actually 5 now as J.J. Rembert, the true walk-on freshman, announced he will enter the transfer portal as I look down and check my phone. So overall, the news just keeps trembling in for Cincinnati. And Russ, obviously, it's looking like this could be a complete roster rehaul for Cincinnati, a complete rebuild. And it's kind of now or never, right? You look down at how things ended the season, didn't go as planned in Big 12 play. Then you fail to make a run in the Crown tournament as well, postseason tournament. There was a lot more issues that people kind of realized. But there's a lot of exits that I don't think many people on the outside really kind of could have expected. I mean, you see Josh Reed go in the portal. You see Dan Skillings go in the portal. You see Cincinnati native Rayvon Griffith go in the portal. Tyler Betsy's now in the portal. There's a lot to talk about here, Russ, and I think it's a great day to do it. So let's get to it.
Yeah, Neil, I would say of the 4 entries so far, the biggest name to do so is Dan Skillings Jr., the leading scorer and leader in multiple categories during the 23-24 season. Obviously never met those heights in 24-25, had that brutal knee injury that knocked him out for a majority of the non-conference slate in the beginning of the season. Looked really good to start the year, 18 points in that first game, and then obviously never looked the same after that. Neil, he's getting interest from some big name schools. Dan Skillings is going to get a big bag to go somewhere else in the transfer portal, but just was the end of his time here in Cincinnati. And overall, Neil, I don't know that Cincinnati is ultimately losing anyone massively great. You don't want to see these guys exit the program, but Neil, the baseline talent level and the overall baseline kind of roster body makeup has to change for this entire program. And you're kind of seeing the shrapnel from that take some guys out.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And I think the biggest thing too was obviously you kind of hoped for guys like Dan Skillings to stay, Rayvon Griffiths to stay, but things didn't really trickle into their favor this past season, right? Dan Skillings battled the knee injury, and I think that kind of messed with a lot of things. Obviously, he made the quote earlier in the season that he intended this to be his last season, but on top of it, the knee injury kind of derailed that thing, and it's going to be interesting, Russ, because you look at it, how things are going, right? For Dan Skillings, since entering the portal, he's heard from schools like Baylor, like Florida.
Breaking
like
news mid-show, Neil. We have Arrington Page
Yep.
entering the portal as well.
Yep, Arrington Page also just went into the portal. So that now marks the 6th Bearcat in the portal. But you look down, as we talk about Dan Skillings, he's heard from Gonzaga, Florida, Pitt, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Baylor, USC, Creighton, LSU, Alabama, Mississippi State are just some of the schools that are listed there in that one. So overall, Dan Skillings is hearing from a plethora of schools, and rightfully so. I mean, we saw the potential when he was fully healthy, and we saw flashes of it last season, but unfortunately, he just wasn't able to really string it together since coming back from that knee injury this season. And personally, Russ, I think that knee injury definitely kind of messed with the confidence and everything too, right? He was playing some of his best ball before the injury, just wasn't able to rebound and find his stride there since the injury. So maybe we see another kind of situation like Victor Locken, right? Where a fresh start was needed and he goes out and has a baller season. And honestly, we hope that is the best because Russ, Dan Skillings was a blast to cover. Everyone knows that. The personality was there. His favorite moment, I think my favorite moment covering him was after the Xavier game where he missed the free throw. He definitely left early, and we asked him about it on the offensive rebound. We said, Dan, did you leave early? He goes, oh, absolutely. So there's a lot of good things to remember with Dan's time here. But, Russ, it's looking like this could be still trickling down, right? We're talking Arrington Page now hit the portal. That was one that we kind of anticipated. Tyler Betsy was one we anticipated. Things are just now starting to get moving for Cincinnati.
That it is, and I mean, Tyler Betsy, another name I think we need to touch on here. Obviously, Josh Reed as well. I mean, it's a crossroads for the program, a crossroads for the players. A guy like Josh Reed, for example, he comes on at the end of the season, gets into the starting lineup, puts up career highs. What did he do that, 4 or 5 times? He put up career point highs in the final 12 games of the season. And now he's looking around and likely thinking, hey, I mean, I'd like to be in a bigger role in my college basketball life. I'd like to get a bigger access. I'd like to see what's out there. I was going to go see what's out there and see what's in the portal for him. You mentioned Rayvon Griffith, hometown native, hometown guy that played a lot, scored a career high 8 points in the final game against UCF. Obviously trying to see what he can do there, but just didn't really break through into the rotation much this season. And then ultimately, Neil, he is leaving the door open in his post to return to Cincinnati. He was the only guy who we saw definitively say that in their posts, saying goodbye to the Cincinnati Bearcats fans. But all in all, Neil, like Arrington Page, for example, we touched on him. He was a complete ghost down the back half of the season. What did he have, Neil? I think he had a total of 5 points.
I think he had a total of 15 minutes. Let's look at it here, Russ. Looking at the back half.
Like since February, I think he played like 15 minutes and had 5 total points total.
Yep. Since February 11th, he's played 1, 2, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 16 minutes since the team's win over Utah.
Yeah. The writing was on the wall there. The writing was on the wall with Tyler Betsy. Those two guys didn't really play at all in the college basketball crown. And so just kind of is what it is, Neil. It's just the way college sports has gone these days. It's the way college sports is. And in a year where Wes Miller, I can think definitively say, is feeling the heat going into his 5th season with no NCAA tournament appearances, he's looking to flush the roster pretty well clean and get a new group of guys in the fold, which we will discuss after this break on Bearcat Blitz. 2 guys now definitively in the fold, and one already signed in Kirk Kriisa, the former Arizona and Kentucky guard, played with the Wildcats last year, and then Sincere Harris, the former West Virginia guard. 2 guys that have played very close to Cincinnati in recent years and now will be Cincinnati Bearcats in 2025-26. We'll discuss that after this break on Bearcat Blitz. Neil Sincere Harris and Kerr Creesa joining the Cincinnati Bearcats basketball roster for the 2025-26 season. We'll start with Creesa. He is a veteran, final year of eligibility in 2025-26, got injured early on in conference play, had a foot injury that derailed his entire season. He didn't come back to the court after getting hurt on December 7th at West Virginia. He averaged 11 points, 4.7 assists in his lone season there 2 years ago, and 42.4% shooting from outside. He's got a career 54.1% career true shooting rate, Neil, and a 79.1% mark from the line. He's had multiple games with 10 plus assists, has shown a great acumen for creation and ball handling duties. Neil, this is a guy that I think could easily take pressure off of Day Thomas, take some pressure off of Jizzle James next year, and be I would expect him to be one of the main ball handlers and main offensive creators for Cincinnati in 2025-26.
Yeah, Russ, and that's a great thing too, because when you bring in the addition of Kerr Creesa and seeing how this roster kind of unfolds, right? Jizzle James, Day Thomas, now you add Kerr Creesa to the fold. It potentially kind of solidifies some things potentially for what Connor Hickman could potentially be back, or we don't know yet. But adding a point guard is definitely interesting for Cincinnati, especially knowing that you're bringing in Keyshawn Tillery, a top 50 prospect, but adding another ball handler is something that could be interesting playing out with the situation of Connor Hickman. We haven't heard anything on that news, but adding a fourth point guard kind of shows that things might not be trending in the right direction, in my opinion. Now, that's not
long shot. It was always a long shot for him to be able to.
Now, it's not 100% certain, but you wouldn't go out and add a veteran kind of point guard there if something wasn't brewing on that aspect, in my opinion.
Two guards with that, too, and Harris as well.
Yeah, so then you bring in a guy like Kerr Creesa and Russ. Personally, playing against Kerr Creesa, you hate it. Having him on your team, you love it because you see the defensive energy that he brings. I think I saw a tweet the other day. It was like top 5 dog mentalities in college basketball, and Kerr Creesa was up at the top of that. You saw the list of him chirping to Luka Doncic. So overall, this is a big-time ad for Cincinnati. And when he's fully healthy, Russ, he is one of the best facilitators in all of college basketball, averaging nearly 5 assists a game. When he is fully healthy, he is a true impact player. Now, he has struggled with injuries over the last few seasons. He missed all this time this past season with the foot injury. He also was hurt at West Virginia. So overall, that's a major concern, right? Is the health-wise. But then
that's the biggest hang-up, right, Neil? I mean, especially a foot injury. Like, we just went down this as you and I covering a guy coming from Kentucky, a veteran with a guard, a lot of experience. This smells a lot like the CJ Frederick situation, and I hope it doesn't play out like that for Kerr Creesa.
Yeah, absolutely, and we hope we don't see things play out that way. But overall, you never know what's going to happen. But he could come to Cincinnati and make a big time play too, Russ. And it's worth noting,
right?
Cincinnati struck out on him the last 2 years in the transfer portal, so maybe they always do say third time's the charm, right? But overall. And it's also too worth noting, Russ, that we have heard Wes Miller emphasis of this in the past, like keeping those past relationships. He mentioned that while talking about AP a couple of times this season. Now you're in a similar situation with Kerr Creesa, right? It's important to keep those relationships and those doors open. And like we mentioned earlier, Rayvon Griffith still has the option to come back to Cincinnati based on his tweet. And from some of the things we have heard, the option for him to return is there. Now, if he wants to go look and take on an expanded role, that might be something different. But the option for him to return to Cincinnati is still on the table for Rayvon Griffith, and that's important to note as well, especially being a Cincinnati kid. But, Russ, you bring in 2 big-time additions so far, Kerr Creesa, and I think Sincere Harris, Russ, is a sleeper pick for Cincinnati in the transfer portal, right? This is one of the best defenders, not only in the Big 12, but in all of college basketball. Big 12 defensive team this year, but he has shown to be one of the best defenders. And I mean, you saw his coach, Chester Frazier, come out and say he is one of the only players in college basketball where if you say go guard a guy one-on-one, he's going to be able to stick his matchup and probably get you a stop. Now, we've seen big-time defenders, Russ, and from everything we have heard, we've covered, we know how good of a defender John Newman was for this program a few years ago. But I've heard some things that Sincere Harris could be a better defender than what John Newman was, and what's different about the
He's a
situation.
better defender than John Newman. The numbers bear that out. I mean, he's the only Neil Power 4 player in the country this past season to check in under 6'5" and notch a 3+% block rate and a 3+% steal rate. On top of that, second best defensive box plus minus in the country among players who played over 60% of their team's minutes. I mean, this guy is out there all the time on the floor, and he's almost always doing the right thing defensively. But Neil, the reason this kind of defender was probably available to the Bearcats is because of the offensive issues. Under 40% shooter, under 12% shooter from deep, did shoot 75% from the free throw line. So there is hope for his shot given that precursor at the line there. But overall, Neil Harris, the biggest issue is that offensive game. The defense is locked down. He's going to be a firm part of the rotation if he can't hit the broadside of a barn door just because of his defense alone.
Yeah, and that's true to note too, Russ. And piggybacking on something, Tyler Betsy just released a tweet that says he will be entering the transfer portal, but he'll be keeping his options open. And with the return to Cincinnati still being in consideration, he said, "My options, weighing my options, Coach West and I have talked, and Cincinnati will still be in consideration." So this now marks the second player to keep Cincinnati in their options after these exit
I'd love
meetings.
to see a percentage, Neil, of like what the percent of players who say I'm leaving my original school option open actually go back to that school. It's got to be less than 5% of total transfers. Not that it's not possible, but I mean, Neil, I would be thoroughly shocked if any of these players return to the Cincinnati Bearcats roster this season. What about you?
I don't know if I would be fully shocked if one or two came back. Obviously, the two that would come back that wouldn't really shock me would be Rayvon and Betsy. Yeah. But overall, Rayvon having the Cincinnati ties, right? That's going to be huge. And then on top of it, a guy like
Griffith would be the one that doesn't shock me because I could see him not getting something closer to this region that really entices him and him wanting to come back and just keep playing at home.
Yeah, and most importantly, too, Tyler Betsy was one of Wes Miller's top-rated recruits in this past class, but not only that, he has a lot of ties to Cincinnati, right? He was coached by former Bearcat Kane Broom back in high school. Kane was with him on all of his visits to Cincinnati. There's a lot of ties for Tyler Betsy here to Cincinnati, and there's a lot of emotional ties as well, knowing that he has a lot of people close in his corner that grew up here and played out their career at Cincinnati. So it's going to be interesting, but if there was two guys that I would say would keep their options open with the potential return to Cincinnati, those would be it.
Neil, in terms of Sincere Harris, Kirk Carissa, as we kind of wind down the addition portion of this show and get to the final couple comments and wrap things up here, Sincere Harris or Kirk Carissa, who do you think will ultimately be the more impactful player in the 25-26 season?
Me personally, I'm going to go with Sincere Harris, and my reason being that, Russ, is obviously your point guards as of right now. Jizzle James is – who knows what's up in the air right now, but it kind of sounds like he's going to be returning next season.
Social media posts have hinted of him being pretty locked in. Yeah.
And then Day Thomas as well, kind of, what you're getting with those two guys, right? And then you bring in a guy like Keyshawn Tillery. Kirk Carissa could just be that veteran guy to kind of take on that veteran role and guide those young guys, right? Day Thomas, yes, he's a senior, but having a guy like Kirk Carissa who's been around for 6 years now is massive. That could take games to the next level at the point guard position. And Cincinnati lacked ball handlers last year, especially when Connor Hickman went down, CJ Frederick went down. And then you saw from Day Thomas and Jizzle James both have to take different roles, right? Cincinnati desperately missed a third ball handler last season. That's why I think Sincere Harris will have a bigger role than what Kirk Carissa might have. Kirk Carissa now fully healthy. If he's fully healthy, who knows what a point guard lineup could look like, right? But Sincere Harris being the defender he is, 6'5", a bigger frame, played at this caliber level in the Big 12 for the last 2 seasons, made a tremendous impact, and still has 2 to 3 years of eligibility left compared to just one final year for Kirk Carissa. That's going to be the difference maker, and that's why I'm saying Sincere Harris is what you're going to get with him. He might not be the most offensive threat, but you're going to get a pretty damn good defender on the opposite end in Sincere Harris, and he's proved that. proved that at a high level. And
in the Big 12. Yeah.
In the Big 12, one of the best conferences in all of basketball. But on top of it, you now have years to build with him, right? Being a junior, heading into the junior season, you still got 2 years to work with compared to a guy like Kirk Friese. It could be his final go-round. You never know what might come happen. He might be able to come give you 6 to 8 minutes off the bench a game. Who knows? But I think the role is more carved out for Sincere Harris.
I would agree. And I think there's a higher impact ceiling for Harris just in terms of the takeover he could have for all of the Josh Reed roles, all of the Josh Reed defensive dirty work that he did. Dylan Mitchell, no real rumblings of him entering just yet. We're assuming he will be a part of the team, and being able to take some of that interior, some of that kind of perimeter defending pressure off of Dylan Mitchell is going to be huge from Sincere Harris. And I don't know, Neil, maybe Harris, I'm anticipating him possibly bringing some Mountaineer edge to this team, some leadership, maybe some chutzpah, some light of fire under the fellows when things are getting into the doldrums of a game, getting into the rock fight area of a game where you got to dig deep and go will out victories in the second toughest conference, arguably the toughest conference in America, neck and neck with the SEC. So I think Harris has a huge high ceiling impact ability, especially on defense, where I expect him to be their number one perimeter defender this season. And we know how important those perimeter defenders are in the Big 12 once we get to that portion of the calendar of play. Neil, biggest remaining need as we tie up the bow on this week's show for Cincinnati is big man. They got to find a way to add a front court presence. Right now, Neil, with the entry of Arrington Page, who we anticipated going into the portal, UC really only has like Tyler McKinley. That's about it at the forward position. And Halveen as well, who is very raw. And I don't know necessarily a guy that you want to rely on as your number 2 front court player going into a 25-26 season. So maybe you get some serious development out of Halveen and he can be that backup 5 and you can have Tyler McKinley be your starting 5. But then again, Neil, I mean, that's what, 5 total games of overall experience in that front court right now. There's no way they're going to go into the season with just those 2 guys. That has to be the number 1 priority right now. And that Corey Evans kind of whiteboard, big board assessment sheet is getting a big man into the fold for this roster, which has Halveen Zealot at center right now, Dylan Mitchell at power forward, and Tyler McKinley at power forward. Nothing else, Neil, besides that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Russ, for me, if I'm Cincinnati, I'm making a call to a certain individual, a certain big man that's now back in the transfer.
Down in Lexington.
Down in Lexington, baby. A guy that Cincinnati is very familiar with, started his career at Oklahoma State. But I'm right there with you. They need a big man. They need a big man. Call up Brandon Garrison. That's a big-time portal addition, a guy that would fit the scheme really well for Cincinnati. But not even that, Russ. I would not be surprised to see them go out and get 2 big men. Maybe get your starter and maybe get you a reserve guy, a younger guy. That would make sense. But
there's plenty of scholarships to offer out there now.
Exactly. Plenty of scholarships to offer. But most importantly, we know what Tyler McKinley is going to bring to the table next year. And I know fans and this staff was really excited for him and the role he was.
Looked really good in on-court workouts towards the end of the year.
Yes. And for people noting too, it was a complete overhaul of the injury, right? An injury that McKinley could have came in here and probably given you 12 to 14, maybe even 16 minutes a game to kind of take the load off Aziz Bandaogo and Arrington Page. But the injury happened. He was fully cleared back in January, mid-January. They elected to use the red shirt, which was a smart decision in my opinion. That way you don't rush him back out there after an ACL, and then you fully give him an offseason to work out, get back to his old self. But he's going to play a huge role for Cincinnati. He's a stretch 4 who can step out, knock down the outside shot, but he's also a bigger guy. He'll take you to the rack too. So that's what Cincinnati really missed, was a big-time post player, could turn their back to the bucket, back a defender down, and get to the hoop. That's what they missed. And right now, Russ, I think they got to add 2, right? You add your starter. Now, whoever that might be, cool. But I definitely see them adding 2 guys there. That's the biggest need for them, is the front court right now. You kind of have your guards. You kind of anticipate now. All depends on what might happen with a guy like Dylan Mitchell per se, but it's all going to depend on his decision before Cincinnati makes 2. But most certainly they're going to get 1, but I think it kind of plays alongside with what Dylan Mitchell might do in order if they're going to go out and get another big man.
Yeah, I would agree there. See what Mitchell decides and then maybe throw a lot of your assets at that starting big man option. Sean Phillips Jr., Arizona State 7-footer, is a player they've reached out to.
That's a good name to keep an eye on too, Russ, because
yeah,
when Arizona State came here, man, he was tough and he was gritty. He was the definition of an old school Bearcat. I know he was chirping a little bit, but he is a tough, physical defender, 7 foot tall, played great along Jaden Quaintonance, who's now at Kentucky. So overall, that's another big-time name to keep an eye on who's played in the Big 12, can come in, see significant minutes right away. I don't know. That's a good name to keep an eye on, a great name to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and big shout out to Bearcat Bunch. Does a great job of just kind of running down the portal tracker on his Google Doc sheet. And who's that latest name on there with the little Giselle James follow? Oh, that's Mr. Brandon Garrison from the Kentucky Wildcats. We'll see if he ends up actually entering the transfer portal, which has not happened as of this recording. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. The transfer portal mania continues on this week. We'll be back at it either Thursday or Friday to give you the latest on what's happening with Cincinnati Bearcats basketball in these hot and heavy first few weeks of the 2025 transfer portal action. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three.